In the vast scope of galactic scientific discoveries, finding something truly unexpected was as rare as finding a capable bureaucrat, meaning it happened about once every 3 centuries, usually by accident, and often because someone filled out the wrong form. The Xenobiology Department at the Greater Galactic Research Institute had long ago accepted that their work would mostly consist of papers with titles, like yet another study on convergent evolution, and why every species eventually develops something like a crab. The researchers had settled into predictable routines, documenting the unremarkable nature of life across the universe, reinforcing their belief that evolution always found the most efficient path forward, until someone actually read the human genome, not just skimmed it as everyone else had when humans first achieved space travel, but truly examined it, every detail, including the footnotes. The researcher in question was a well-respected xenobiologist, known for being the only scientist in the galaxy willing to read entire genetic sequences without jumping ahead to the more interesting parts. Colleagues saw this as either an incredible dedication or a sign of undiagnosed masochism. On that fateful day, they sat in their lab, surrounded by holographic displays of human DNA sequences, when they noticed something unusual. Scattered throughout the genome were sections labeled with something that made no sense at all, deprecated. Now, finding nonsense in genetic code wasn't new. Most species had some junk DNA, leftover viral sequences, and the occasional genetic equivalent of a programmer's frustrated comment. But this was different. This was organized nonsense, cataloged nonsense, properly documented nonsense. The researcher checked their translation matrix, then checked it again, and even had 3 different AI systems verify it. The label remained stubbornly consistent, deprecated. In software development, a field the researcher had briefly explored during what they called their rebellious phase, deprecated code refers to outdated functionality kept for compatibility. It's the stuff that isn't needed anymore, but is still retained because something somewhere might still rely on it. The implications were troubling. No species kept deprecated genetic code, like holding on to evolutionary rough drafts just in case they were needed later. It was inefficient, messy, and utterly absurd. The researcher did what any scientist would do. They tried to ignore it. They spent 3 days convincing themselves it was a translation error. On the 4th day, they found more instances of the label. On the 5th day, they discovered these sections had version numbers. The preliminary paper they published sparked exactly the reaction you'd expect from the galactic scientific community. Complete denial followed by frantic checking of their own work, which led to a series of emergency conferences. These sessions largely consisted of experts trying to prove the researcher wrong. The Galactic Research Council called a special session, which was noteworthy because the council usually only met once every 50 years, and the last meeting had been 49 years and 11 months ago. The chamber buzzed with nervous energy, the kind usually reserved for when someone accidentally evolves a silicon-based life form in the lab waste disposal unit again. The presentation was going smoothly until someone asked a question everyone had been avoiding. What exactly is in these deprecated sections? The researcher displayed their findings, and the room went silent. The deprecated code contained everything from alternative metabolic pathways to outdated organ systems, from backup circulatory arrangements to what appeared to be experimental nervous system configurations. Some of these dated back millions of years, and all were perfectly preserved, annotated, and maintained by the human genome, as if they might be needed again someday. It was like discovering that, while every other species had been carefully optimizing their evolution, humans had been running a genetic version control system with full backup retention. They weren't just carrying around genetic baggage. They were cataloging it, preserving it, and keeping it ready for potential reuse. The realization hit the galactic scientific community like a quantum physics lecture at a children's birthday party. Every species occasionally retained vestigial features, but those were always in the process of being phased out. Humans, however, seem to have looked at the standard evolutionary practice of removing outdated code and decided to implement their own version control system instead. Research teams across the galaxy rushed to analyze human DNA, hoping to prove this was an elaborate mistake. Instead, they kept finding more evidence that the deprecated sections weren't random or degraded. They were meticulously maintained with regular integrity checks. It was as if humans had evolved a biological GitHub. One particularly alarming discovery came from a junior researcher who noticed that some of these deprecated features showed signs of recent access. Not activation, precisely, but something more akin to a system check, as if the human genome periodically verified that these backup systems were still functional. The researcher who made the initial discovery became very popular at academic conferences, though this popularity mostly consisted of other scientists cornering them at the refreshment tables to explain why they must be wrong. The researcher developed a habit of hiding behind potted plants and carrying emergency snacks to avoid attending formal dinners. As the evidence continued to mount, the galactic scientific community was forced to face a difficult truth. They had to entirely rethink their understanding of evolutionary optimization. While they had been proudly discarding their evolutionary history for the sake of efficiency, humans had been hoarding theirs like genetic pack rats. The first part of the mystery was solved, but it raised an even more troubling question. Why would any species need to maintain such an extensive backup of deprecated features? What exactly were humans preparing for? The answer would come sooner than anyone could have imagined. It took exactly 3 standard galactic weeks for the situation to escalate from a fascinating scientific discovery to a potential diplomatic crisis. This was actually a slow pace by galactic standards, where most discoveries sparked diplomatic crises within days, usually because someone forgot to file the proper forms in triplicate. The Xenobiological Institute began receiving funding requests from every research facility in known space. Even quantum philosophers, who normally viewed biology with disdain, suddenly developed a keen interest in human genetic structure. Their grand applications, notably, included phrases like potential metaphysical implications of biotemporal version control systems, which was impressive, considering nobody really understood what that meant. The first breakthrough came from an unlikely source, a graduate student tasked with organizing the deprecated genetic sections by date. They noticed something strange about the timestamps. Some of the deprecated features weren't actually old. They were new, or rather, they were old features that had been recently modified, as if someone had been tweaking the backup code. This discovery spread throughout the scientific community, like a particularly aggressive computer virus. The implications were enormous. Humans weren't just preserving their evolutionary history. They were actively maintaining it. It was like finding out your antique collection was secretly a fully functional arsenal. Research facilities began reporting strange equipment malfunctions, especially when running certain tests on human genetic samples. The accidents always seemed to happen just before any significant breakthroughs could be documented. One particularly advanced scanner exploded dramatically, leaving behind only a scorch mark and a printout that read Error 404, Gene Not Found. The Galactic Security Council, which usually dealt with pressing matters like standardizing spacecraft bathroom signs, called an emergency session. The transcript of this meeting was later classified at the highest level, though rumors suggested it consisted mainly of various species representatives trying to out-panic each other in increasingly formal language. Meanwhile, human researchers had been strangely quiet about the whole affair. Too quiet. According to some, when pressed for comments, they tended to smile in ways that made other species deeply uncomfortable and say things like, "Oh, that old thing? We were wondering when someone would notice." The breakthrough that changed everything came from a mining accident in the Outer Rim. A human mining crew had been trapped by a cave-in in an environment that should have been lethal. The rescue team arrived 18 hours later to find the miners not only alive, but surprisingly comfortable. Medical scans showed they had temporarily developed enhanced oxygen absorption capabilities and denser bone structures, features that exactly matched some of the deprecated genetic code. The miners themselves seemed remarkably unconcerned about suddenly manifesting abilities from their evolutionary past. One was quoted saying, "Yeah, my grandmother could do that too. Comes in handy during spring cleaning. The medical report was immediately classified, though copies somehow kept showing up in random computer systems across the galaxy, usually filed under things we really wish we hadn't learned. A series of similar incidents followed. A human diplomat survived an assassination attempt because their skin temporarily adapted to changes in color. A human athlete broke several records before officials discovered they had regrown a more efficient respiratory system, and a human chef accidentally developed enhanced taste buds and created a dish so delicious it caused a minor religious crisis among the gastronomes of Sector 7. The galactic scientific community began to notice a pattern. Stress, danger, or extreme need seemed to trigger these dormant abilities. It was as if the human genome had an emergency toolkit, complete with an instruction manual and a warranty card. More troubling was the discovery that these activations weren't random. They were targeted, specific, and most disturbing of all, reversible. Humans weren't just carrying around genetic backup. They had a fully functional biological feature toggle system. The Xenical Security Committee drafted a resolution requiring all humans to undergo genetic modification to remove these deprecated sections. The human representatives responded by pointing out that such modifications would violate at least 15 different galactic laws, 2 trade agreements, and 1 recipe for chocolate chip cookies that had somehow been included in the original Human Rights Charter due to a filing error. Underground research continued, with both human and alien scientists working together to understand the full scope of this discovery. They found more deprecated features, backup organs, alternative metabolic pathways, and what appeared to be a completely different digestive system optimized for processing minerals. One researcher swore they found code for chlorophyll production, though this was later chalked up to spending too many hours staring at genetic sequences while drinking fermented beverages. The galaxy was faced with an uncomfortable truth. They had welcomed humans into the galactic community, thinking they were dealing with a relatively straightforward species, only to discover they had invited in what amounted to evolutionary Swiss Army knives with a sense of humor. As one alien scientist wrote in their private notes, the most terrifying thing isn't that humans keep their evolutionary backups. It's that they seem to think this is perfectly normal. And they're surprised we don't do the same. What exactly were humans expecting to happen that would require such extensive preparation? The answer to that question was approaching faster than anyone realized, and it would make the galaxy wish they had paid more attention to those human adventure novels about surviving impossible odds. As it turned out, having a backup plan wasn't paranoia if you actually needed it. The situation reached its tipping point during what would later be known as the Sigma Draconis incident, though the official records insisted on calling it Unexpected Biological Response Event 20-387b. Bureaucrats, as it turned out, were the same across the galaxy, allergic to calling anything by its actual name. A deep space mining operation had gone catastrophically wrong. The automated systems of Mining Station Delta 7 malfunctioned, trapping 3 human workers in a section that was rapidly losing atmospheric pressure. The emergency systems were offline, the backup systems had failed, and the backup systems had apparently taken an early lunch break. What happened next would rewrite several textbooks on xenobiology and cause at least one senior researcher to retire and take up pottery instead. The humans, faced with near-vacuum conditions, did something that should have been impossible. They adapted. Not slowly, not over generations, but right then and there. The station's medical sensors recorded the entire process, much to the horror of the galactic scientific community. Multiple deprecated genetic sequences activated simultaneously, triggering a cascade of biological changes. The humans developed enhanced oxygen storage capabilities, reinforced capillary systems, and even modified skin structures to help retain internal pressure. When the rescue team finally arrived, they found 3 very alive, somewhat uncomfortable, but surprisingly chatty humans playing a card game. One of them complained that the lack of gravity made it difficult to keep the cards in place. The rescue team's medical officer had to be sedated. The incident report, which was immediately classified at the highest level and somehow still ended up being discussed in every bar across the galaxy within a week, contained phrases like spontaneous genetic reconfiguration an active evolutionary response. The appendix included a note from a junior researcher that simply read, "This isn't fair. Evolution doesn't work like this. I want a refund on my doctorate." Meanwhile, human scientists have been conducting their own research, approaching the matter with the kind of casual enthusiasm that made other species nervous. They discovered that the deprecated sections weren't just random evolutionary leftovers. They were carefully preserved adaptations, each tagged with what appeared to be usage notes and compatibility warnings. One human researcher compared it to having a genetic app store, except everything was labeled might come in handy later. This explanation did little to calm the growing anxiety among other species. The Galactic Security Council convened another emergency session, this time with better snacks and stronger drinks. The debate centered around one crucial question: what should they do about a species that treated their genome like a modular toolkit? The humans had created a comprehensive survival system, an intricate web of genetic adaptations designed to face extreme temperatures, high pressure, low oxygen, intense radiation, and even environments that didn't yet exist in known space. A particularly sharp-eyed xenobiologist observed something startling. Humans appeared to have backup systems for their backup systems. In some cases, they had even prepared backup systems for those. It was as if they'd not only brought a spare tire on their interstellar journey, but an entire spare car just in case. The underground research community buzzed with speculation. Some suggested that Earth's volatile past had forced humans to develop these extraordinary traits. Others speculated that humanity had somehow anticipated the need for such rapid adaptation in space. A few fringe theorists, however, proposed a far more unsettling idea: that humans were preparing for something specific, though few dared even consider what kind of event would demand such extensive biological contingency planning. Tensions between species reached new heights when several human colonies began reporting strange phenomena, deprecated genetic features seemingly activating in response to their new environments. On a high-gravity world, children were born with denser bones and more efficient muscle structures. On a low-light planet, many humans developed enhanced night vision. The galaxy was forced to confront a chilling realization. They weren't dealing with just another spacefaring species. They were up against a species that had turned their entire evolutionary history into a comprehensive, accessible toolkit, complete with a user manual and a quick start guide. As one alien philosopher remarked, "The truly terrifying thing isn't that humans can reactivate ancient genetic features, but that they seem to have been expecting to need them." And so the galaxy found itself grappling with an uncomfortable truth. Humans had not just preserved their evolutionary legacy, they had weaponized it. The question was no longer why humans had kept these archaic traits. It was what had made them so sure they would need them. That question was answered, much to the galaxy's dismay, on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. The crisis began when a previously unknown spatial anomaly appeared at the edge of populated space. The Galactic Council's Department of Unexpected Phenomena, typically concerned with issues like spontaneously tap-dancing nebulae, was now dealing with something entirely new: a massive wave of exotic radiation that defied every known law of physics, and several that hadn't even been written yet. In typical bureaucratic fashion, a committee was quickly formed to determine whether another committee should be established to study the situation. But by the time that committee had finalized their proposal, the radiation wave had already hit the outer colonies. The effects were immediate and catastrophic. Most species found their cellular structures breaking down under the strange radiation. Emergency evacuations began, but it was clear that there wasn't enough time nor enough ships to save everyone. The galaxy faced its first true existential crisis since the Great Cafeteria Incident of 2157, an event which, for reasons of public sanity, remains classified. Then, something unexpected happened. The human colonies didn't collapse. Instead, they adapted. Multiple deprecated genetic sequences activated simultaneously across the affected populations. It wasn't just a few backup systems kicking in, it was dozens, working together as if they had been designed specifically for this moment. The scans revealed something that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Humans were developing new cellular structures that didn't just resist the radiation, they actually processed it. Their ancient genetic systems, long dormant, had included radiation-handling mechanisms from Earth's early evolutionary history. One human colonist, when asked how they were suddenly able to metabolize exotic radiation, merely shrugged and said, "Grandma always said our family was good at adapting to new diets." In an official report, this response was recorded, followed by several pages of baffled scientific notes and a doodle of a face marked with confusion. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council found itself in the unprecedented position of having to ask humans for help. The very features they had once deemed obsolete were now the only thing preventing extinction for several species. The irony was not lost on anyone, especially the humans, who responded with remarkable humility and good-natured humor given the circumstances. Human geneticists, working alongside their alien counterparts, made a startling discovery. These deprecated genetic sequences weren't just random remnants of Earth's past. They had been meticulously maintained and were part of a vast, organized survival system that had been honed over millions of years. It was as if humanity's ancestors, watching the chaos of early Earth, decided to preserve every successful adaptation they had ever developed, just in case the universe threw something unexpected their way. The human genome, it turned out, wasn't a streamlined product of natural evolution. It was more like a biological Swiss Army knife, crafted by a paranoid survivalist with infinite resources and a love of backup plans. Every seemingly obsolete feature had been preserved, tested, and kept in working order, ready to be activated at a moment's notice. As the crisis deepened, more human traits sprang to life. Some colonies gained the ability to repair radiation damage in minutes. Others learned to enter suspended animation when resources ran low. One group even accidentally discovered how to photosynthesize exotic radiation, leading to some awkward conversations about whether they were still carbon-based life forms. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council, which had long argued that maintaining deprecated genetic features was inefficient, found itself penning an official apology. The document read, "We may have been slightly hasty in our judgment," which, in scientific circles, was the equivalent of getting on their knees and begging for forgiveness. The most shocking revelation came from a deeper analysis of the deprecated sections of human DNA. They weren't just a collection of random evolutionary leftovers. They were categorized: environmental adaptation, crisis response, and, most tellingly, just in case everything goes wrong. It was like discovering that, while other species had optimized their evolution for specific environments, humanity had evolved to adapt to any environment. The galaxy had to reconsider its understanding of evolutionary efficiency. While other species evolved to thrive in their current environments, humans evolved to survive any environment. Their genetic code wasn't bloated, it was prepared. As one alien philosopher, shortly before taking up professional finger painting to escape the existential weight of it all, remarked, "The truly terrifying thing isn't that humans keep their deprecated features. It's that they were right to do so." The crisis was far from over, but its nature had shifted. The galaxy now found itself asking an unsettling question. What do you do when you realize that the species you once dismissed as evolutionary misfits is actually more prepared for the future than you are? The answer, when it came, would reshape galactic society forever, and it would make everyone more cautious when suggesting that any part of human biology was unnecessary.